So growing at that scale where you guys basically 4x, like how do you still keep that culture and that
Yeah.
shared mission still there within the company?
It's one of the most important things you could do as a company. I mean, hands down. I always say that there's no difference between culture and leadership. Meaning, someone will be like, "Oh, this culture of this company sucks." You know what? The leaders of the company then suck.
Right.
Meaning, if you don't have the right leaders, you don't have the right culture. So, kind of step number one in ensuring you have a great culture is you need the leaders in the company to exemplify that culture that you really stand for.
Right.
We've actually codified the cultural attributes that are most important to our company. I can share it with you if you want.
Yeah, please. That
Okay.
would be amazing. Yeah.
So there are 5 things, and we actually call it here. Where's that?
We got the manifesto.
Well, no, I don't see it right here. We actually have scope bottles at everyone's desk, and the reason for it is it stands for scope, not because people have bad breath. Don't worry. And what it stands for is S is for selflessness. That we like to hire and promote people who are truly selfless in how they work. They don't prioritize what their needs are. There's not an ego focus, but it's more about how do I help the team. Right. That's S for selfless. C is for celebrate big wins, small wins, etc. There we go. Here's
awesome.
scope bottles. Yay!
That's genius. I love that. Did you get a good shot of that, Emmett, on live?
So
every employee gets this.
Every employee has one at their desk.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So C is for celebrating. O is for over communicating. When you get bigger, you can't just be a good communicator. You have to be an over communicator. If you're not sure, CC that person on that email. If you're not sure, set up that meeting to make sure that everyone understands exactly what's happening. You can't just manage through telling 2 or 3 people when you have 120. It's very different than when you had people only 20 employees.
Right.
P is for planning. That's important because again, as you get bigger, you can't just operate by the seat of your pants and and just make decisions quickly. And E is for empowering, and that's about empowering employees. If they see something, then they should say something. If they disagree with me, they should walk into my office and tell me I completely disagree. Right. It's about empowering people to be the CEOs of their area and owning it. So we use that for recruiting. Right. We use that for reviews of employees, and I think it really resonates because it makes sure that the types of people who we continue to bring in, the types of leadership qualities that we look for, are people who are selfless, focused on celebrating, over communicating, planning oriented, and empowering of people.
Right. So do you think, is it ever too early for a company to set those values, like when they're starting out, or would you say wait a little bit for them to figure it out?
I don't think, I think it's like when you have 3 employees, you certainly don't need to codify that, like, okay, these are our cultural values.
Yeah.
Because it has to kind of come up from the ground up, and it has to really represent who you are.
Right.
We frankly didn't codify our values until we were about 100 employees. Right. Because it had to represent who we are rather than just kind of some words on a screen. It had to be when I talked about it with the team, they said, "Oh my God, that's so us."
Yeah.
And there's not that so us when there's only 3 or 4 people. So what I would say is entrepreneurs need to be cognizant of the types of leaders and employees that they bring in initially, because the initial people are going to have an outsized impact on the culture of the company, without a doubt, and understand the types of attributes that they're looking for, high sense of urgency or high analytic focus, whatever it is.
Right.
But you shouldn't codify anything for quite some time.
Right. So that could be a good segue to my next question, which is, what is your advice for entrepreneurs dealing with failure and adversity? Right. I mean, I can remember when I was first starting Law Trades and we were raising our first round of funding, I must have gotten rejected by at least 100 different investors. And from each rejection, I took it as like, all right, how can I sort of like improve from there, or like, what are some data points that I can like capture to sort of improve my next pitch, and so on and so forth. But for a lot of folks out there, it's a very lonely, distressing sort of like path that they take. How do you deal with that yourself? But also, like, what's some advice you could give to entrepreneurs that are out there in dealing with failure and adversity?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like to some extent you embraced it, and it's very easy to say embrace it. But you have to say, what is the goal of the initial meetings that I'm going to be having? If the expectation of trying to raise money in an initial meeting is that money is just going to be coming and flowing left and right at you, and people are just going to be falling in love with your concept, majority of the time. Then you need to reset those expectations.
Right.
It's very easy to say that failure is far more valuable than success, but it really is.
Yeah.
And like the most important thing an entrepreneur can do is to say, I am going to embrace failure. I am going to fail 100 times, and from every single one of them, I'm going to figure out exactly what you did. What is the one thing that I did wrong? What's the one takeaway that I can make to just make my pitch deck better, to make my pitch better, to build a better relationship? Right. Being introspective and being truly self-aware and not taking it personally that the failure means you're a failure. Mm-hmm. It's not a failure if you learn something. And it's about kind of changing the definition of failure. Right. If you presented and they don't end up deciding to invest behind you, but you learned something and you built a relationship with someone, that's hardly a failure. That's a success. Right. And you have to be looking at all those small win successes and not perceiving them as failures.
Right. And I guess that's where sort of the passion comes from, right? So it's like you're not starting a startup for all the goodness of it. You're kind of just like, what level of pain can I assess? Can I really partake to start this journey?
Absolutely. You have to be willing to go through a whole lot of, obviously, pain. But the goal is to make it non-painful, in my personal opinion. It's to say, I am going to learn so much every single time. And if you say the goal of a startup, Lean Startup is one of my favorite books. Yeah. And Lean Startup talks about how the goal of a startup is learning. Right. Straight up. So if the goal of a startup is learning, and you're meeting lots of people, and you're going to be learning from all those conversations, then in the beginning you are achieving your goals. That's not a failure. Right. So it's about setting the right expectations and setting the right goals.
Nice. So to shift gears a little bit back to more of an operational question. Yeah. I read that you grew sales by over 300%. So for all those sales startups that are out there that are looking for, clients, customers, enterprise level customers, yep, what have you, what do you think contributed to that level of growth?
Yeah. Really one thing stands out the most in why we grew sales so quickly. Too many entrepreneurs will think that it's all about hiring the best salesperson and the second best salesperson, the third best salesperson. And then what happens is you don't surround the salespeople with the infrastructure that they oftentimes need to succeed. What we had when I joined was like, let's say, 7 salespeople and 2 people helping to support them with creating decks, mm-hmm, putting ad plans together, managing campaigns. And what happened is each salesperson was actually spending like 80% of his or her time, mm-hmm, not actually selling, but preparing for the sale, preparing the decks, managing campaigns, yeah, afterwards, not actually out there. So oftentimes, and a lot of entrepreneurs don't appreciate this, the success of sales is in the sales support teams that you surround sales with. You want sellers to be on the street. You want sellers to be spending as close to 100% of their time selling.
Right.
And when I started, we had too few employees to do that, so we had lots of sellers that weren't actually spending any time selling. Yeah. They were doing decks. Yeah. So we built out, probably have now, from 7, we now maybe have 11 sellers, mm-hmm, but we have 10 to 15 people supporting those 11 sellers, right, versus 7 and having 2 people supporting them. Right. And now the sellers are actually spending their time focused and really selling, and they have the expertise of people to support them. And I know this sounds very rudimentary, it's just kind of an organizational structure thing, but it's extremely important because the myth of the amazing salesperson that's going to just completely change one's life overnight is all wonderful, and maybe that happens, but it's not repeatable. It's very hard to repeat that. You want to build a system, and that's very, very important. And the second thing is I think that we brought in a great CRO that obviously helped a lot, mm-hmm, leadership. And then the third I would say is the products that we build is we're not just selling like just display banners on our site, but we're building content solutions and big sponsorships and video experiences. So we moved away from kind of just boring traditional display ads into a whole lot, a suite of different better ad solutions. But at the end of the day, I think the number one thing was the support that we provide our sellers.